Hey, everybody, got an interview for you today with the legend himself, Dr. Dean Ornish. Dr. Dean Ornish is a medical doctor. He's clinical professor of medicine, and he's the founder and president of the Preventive Medicine Research Institute. For over 43 years, he has directed clinical research demonstrating that comprehensive lifestyle changes can reverse heart disease without drugs or surgery. Dr. Ornish directed the first randomized control trial demonstrating that comprehensive lifestyle changes may slow, stop, or reverse the progression of early stage prostate cancer. His research showed that comprehensive lifestyle changes affect gene expression, turning on disease-preventing genes and turning off genes that promote cancer and heart disease, as well as the first controlled study showing that these lifestyle changes may begin to reverse cellular aging by lengthening your telomeres. That's pretty cool, right? Dr. Ornish has a diet named after him. It's called the Ornish diet, and it's been rated #1 for heart health by U.S. News and World Report for 10 years in a row. Dr. Ornish is the author of 7 best-selling books. His latest book is co-authored with his wife, Anne. It's called UnDo It: How Simple Lifestyle Changes Can Reverse Most Chronic Disease. So I'm really excited to talk to you, Dr. Ornish. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Well, Chris, I appreciate the chance to be on your show and to share our information with your viewers.
So can we start way back in the very young Dr. Dean Ornish days? Because I'd love to know how your career took a different trajectory. Most doctors, they don't go down the diet and lifestyle transformation path. So what happened in your life to turn you on to this? Because, I know for many, many decades, and even the notion of diet for disease was either dismissed or just considered quackery.
Well, do you want me to begin with why I changed my diet initially in my own life, or later when I became a doctor, why I began doing these things?
I'd love to know what the catalyst was in your life. Yeah.
Well, the catalyst was back, long, long ago in a galaxy far, far away in Dallas, or actually Houston, in January of 1973. I got suicidally depressed. I was at Rice University in Houston, and one of the things that I later learned was that they had the #1 suicide rate, highest suicide rate in the country. Wasn't in their course catalog. And I found out why. And I just had what you now would call an imposter syndrome. I felt like now that I was with a bunch of really smart kids, it was just a matter of time before they figured out that they made a big mistake in letting me in. And then my roommate was one of the 4 kids in the country that year who'd scored a perfect score on his SATs and had a photographic memory. And I really wanted to be a doctor. And one of the courses you have to do well in is called organic chemistry. And my organic chemistry professor, I was sure, had fled Nazi Germany and come to Houston and on his way to Argentina to become my chemistry professor. And he would say, like, look to your left and look to your right, and one of you won't be here by the end of the semester. It was a very old school. And so I began to feel like I was stupid, that somehow I just managed to fool people into thinking that I wasn't. And then I guess in some ways worse than that, I had I can only call a spiritual experience, was that the direct kind of realization that nothing can ultimately bring lasting happiness. And so the combination of feeling like I was never going to amount to anything because I was stupid, and even if I did, it wouldn't matter, I got profoundly depressed. And depression is a very dark hole where it's a reality distortion, as Steve Jobs might say, where you think you're seeing things clearly for the first time, that you think things are really bad. They've always been bad. They'll always be bad. And anytime you thought otherwise, you were just fooling yourself. And that's where the hallmark of depression, the sense of helplessness and hopelessness, comes from. And I'm sure you've been to those dark places given your own experiences. And part of the power of that darkness is to make you feel like it's always that way. There's nothing you're powerless to do anything about it. I mean, ultimately, the light drives out the darkness, but you think there's no light there. It's all darkness. And so I thought, well, gosh, dead people look like they're peaceful, so why don't I just kill myself? And what's the point? And so, and I also could take all the meaning out of life. Who cares? What? No, so what? Big deal. Nothing matters. Why bother? All those kinds of existential nihilistic feelings. And I was planning to do that. I was going to, jump off I lived in this apartment jungle there in Houston, which is, soulless, and it happened to be next to what was then the Houston Oilers football team practice field, and they had this big oil derrick, which was their mascot, which is so appropriate for Houston. I was just going to jump off, and then that'd be the end of it. And then I thought, well, my parents would be really upset. So I decided I was going to get drunk and have a one-car collision, and people just think, oh, how sad he got drunk and was a bad driver. And I'm sure a lot of those one-car collisions are just suicides in disguise. And I was all set to do that. I got to a point where I literally couldn't sleep for a week straight. I was so agitated. I couldn't read a headline in a newspaper and tell you a minute later what it said. But the saving grace for me was I got really sick. I got a really bad case of infectious mononucleosis and was so sick I literally couldn't get out of bed. And then my parents got word that I was not doing well. They came down and saw what a wreck I was, and they brought me home to Dallas and to get better. And the plan in my mind was to get strong enough and well enough to kill myself, which was kind of insane. So meanwhile, at that time, my older sister, who had been the child of the 60s, had really benefited from studying with an ecumenical spiritual teacher named Swami Satchidananda, who parenthetically opened Woodstock. If he looked, and his motto was "Truth is one, paths are many." In other words, he was really trying to say all spiritual paths ultimately will take you to the same place, and just honor all the different paths, but pick one and go down that. In fact, he built this beautiful temple by the James River in Buckingham County called the Lotus Temple, where a beam of light comes up, and then a beam splitter, and then illuminates all the different altars of the different world religions. The idea is it's the same truth, just interpreted and manifesting in different forms. Anyway, so there's an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that was certainly true for me. So in walks this, my parents decided they would have a cocktail party for the Swami. This was in Dallas in 1973, which even today would be weird, but especially weird, whatever that was, 25, 45 years ago now. And so in walks this, what looks like Central Casting's idea of what a Swami should look like, long saffron robes and long white beard and the whole bit. And he sat down in our living room and began to give a satsang, a lecture. And he started off by saying that nothing can bring lasting happiness, which I'd already figured out. That's why I wanted to kill myself. But he was glowing and very happy and peaceful, and I was ready to do myself in. I was like, well, what am I missing here? And he went on to say it's so easy to make fun of these things, but it really turned my life around. What sounds like a new age cliche, that nothing can bring you lasting happiness is the bad news. But the good news, that is our nature to be, with rare exceptions, to be happy and peaceful until we disturb it. And perhaps what may be the ultimate an irony in life is that not being mindful of that, we often run after so many things. Gee, if only I'm feeling bad. I feel, lonely, isolated, depressed. If only I had more money, more power, more sex, more beauty, more accomplishment. If only I could get into medical school, in my case, then I'd be happy. Then people would love me. Then I wouldn't feel so lonely and so stupid. So once you set up that view of the world, he went on to say, however, it turns out you feel bad, because if you don't get it, until you get it, you feel bad, right? If someone else gets it and you don't get it. And by the way, the stress we now know comes not just from what you do, but how you react to what you do. And how you react to what you do is really a function of how you perceive the world. And so if you really perceive that I have to get whatever this is, in my case, getting into medical school, to be happy and healthy and peaceful, then the stakes go way up and the stresses go way up. So it's not just winning or losing, it's being a winner or a loser. You feel like winner people love and losers people don't love. So the stakes go up, the stresses go up. So until you get it, it's really stressful. If you don't get it, it's really stressful. If someone else gets it, it's really stressful. And it reinforces this zero-sum game, dog eat dog view of the world. Like the more you get, the lesser is for me, and you better go around once and better get it while you can and all that. And even if you get it, in the moment, it's seductive because it's like, I got it. Now I'm happy, But invariably, it's followed by either now what? It's never enough. Well, a patient years ago said, I can't even enjoy the view from the mountain I've climbed. I'm already looking over the next one. Right? How many times have you thought, gosh, if I just made $10,000 a year, that would do it. Then I'd really be set. And then it was like, well, maybe 20,000, you know, and then it's just like, it's like chasing your shadow, which just always eludes you. Or it's not now what, it's often so what, big deal. It doesn't really provide that meaning that we're all looking for. A patient, another patient years ago once said, the letdown that comes from accomplishing or getting something that I thought would make me happy and it didn't last was so profound that I always make sure I've got a dozen projects and deals going at the same time so I can immediately shift my, well, this didn't do it, but maybe that will. And so the cycle continues. And so what the Swami taught me, and he became a teacher for me, and so much of my work ultimately was based on his teachings, is that it's our nature, by and large, to be happy and healthy until we disturb it. And, you know, in the process of running after what we think we need to be healthy, we keep disturbing and happy. We end up disturbing what we could have already if we just stop doing that. In fact, the title of the book that my wife Ann and I wrote, Undo It, is really homage to him because he also liked to make puns. And people say, what are you, a Hindu? He'd say, no, I'm an undo, you know. These spiritual practices like meditation, for example, we often think of them as being like Valium in another form, you know, they're going to bring you a sense of peace. But really what they do is they help you quiet down our mind and body enough to stop disturbing what's already there. They don't bring you a sense of peace. They just help you stop disturbing what's there already. And so I thought, okay, well, let me move killing myself down to plan B. I'll try this weird stuff. And you know, I grew up in Texas eating chilies and cheeseburgers and chalupas and eat meat, you know, almost every meal. And was all stressed out and didn't exercise much. So I thought, okay, so I became a vegetarian and I started to meditate. I couldn't even sit still long enough to meditate. So I do walking meditations and you know, that would give me a little bit of exercise as well. And I began to get glimpses of what it felt to be peaceful. And what he would say is at the end of a meditation, for example, when you are generally feeling more peaceful, not to believe that the meditation brought you that feeling, but rather to remind yourself, to literally remind yourself that what you did was to simply quiet down what was there already. Now, you know, a skeptic might say, oh, please give me a break, you know, you're just parsing words, you know, but the implications are actually quite profound because if my happiness is outside me, then the admissions committee of the medical school, or for the matter, whatever I think I need to be happy or healthy, whoever or whatever that is has power over me. But if it's me, then I can do something about that. Again, not to blame myself, but to empower myself because I can say, oh, I can do things differently. And so I decided, okay, let me try that. So I began to get glimpses of that. And I began to redefine, you know, where my happiness came from. And then so I went back to school, transferred to the University of Texas at Austin. And I changed my major and anyway, I ended up graduating first in my class. I gave the baccalaureate, you know, and I say that not to brag, but to say I experienced both ends of that spectrum, being totally worthless and stupid versus being, you know, greatly successful, got into medical school and so on. And then when I was in medical school, I was learning how to do bypass surgery with Dr. Michael DeBakey, who was the pioneer, probably not old enough to remember, but he was the pioneering surgeon who basically invented bypass surgery. And so we cut people open, we bypass their clogged arteries, and he'd tell them they were cured. And more often than not, they'd go home and do all the things that had caused the problem in the first place, you know, eat junk food and not manage stress and smoke and not exercise and so on. And often the new bypasses would clog up and they come back and we cut them open again, sometimes multiple times. And so for me, bypass surgery became a metaphor of an incomplete approach. We're literally bypassing the problem without also treating the cause.
Now, let me interrupt you because at that point in your medical education, were you taught or trained the causes of the heart disease? Were you aware of the causes?
No, I was aware because I got, I went to these places they used to call libraries and they had these things called books and journals. You know?
I've never seen one. What is that?
I just got obsessed with that. Like, you know, in dogs and cats and pigs and rabbits and monkeys, you could cause them to get heart disease if you put them under emotional stress or force them to smoke or put them on a typical American diet or made them sedentary, and you could reverse it if you change those. I said, so why should people be any different? I was a second-year medical student at the time. And
so you became obsessed on your own to learn the cause.
On my own, that's right, because of my own experience with how powerful these things were in my own life. And so, and I want to emphasize again that drugs and surgery can be life-saving when used appropriately. As you know, we've all benefited from that. But at best, in the case of heart disease, they buy you time. They don't really treat the cause. And when you get put on drugs to lower your cholesterol or blood pressure or blood sugar or your heart disease, and you say, doctor, how long do I have to take these? What does the doctor usually say? Forever, right? It's like, I had this cartoon drawn back in the early 1980s from one of my books of doctors busily mopping up the floor around a sink that's overflowing, but nobody's reaching over to turn off the faucet. Like, how long do I have to mop up the floor? Like, forever. Like, well, why don't we just turn off the faucet? And the faucet, the underlying cause, which is again something I learned from the Swami. He kept saying, well, what's the cause? What's behind that? The cause of so many of these life's chronic diseases are the lifestyle choices we make each day. So, and Dr. DeBakey was really old school, and he would say, what year are you, son? And I'd say, well, I'm starting my third year, into my second year. He goes, damn, it's gonna be so much harder to bust you out of here now with these weird ideas you have. And by the way, just as a digression, he called me, he was the kind of guy that would stick your fingers if you didn't move them out of the operating field fast enough, and, we all wore green surgical scrub suits and he wore a blue monogram one. It was, that kind of thing. And he called me out of the blue about 3 or 4 years ago. And he said, I hadn't talked to him in decades, literally, since the 1970s. And he said, hey, Dean, this is Mike DeBakey. And I recognized, he had a very distinctive Louisiana accent, which I recognized immediately after all these decades. I said, hello, to what do I owe this honor? He said, well, those weird ideas that I used to give you such a hard time about when you were my medical student? I said, oh yeah, I remember really well. He goes, that's what's kept me alive all these years. He said, I'm 99 years old now. And I just wanted you to know that before I die, that, my wife got interested in these kinds of things and in your work. And I just thought you'd like to know that, which I thought was a really cool thing to do.
That's amazing.
If you live long enough, you just never know. Anyway, so I decided, much to my parents' dismay, to take a year off between my second and third years of medical school to do a pilot study of 10 patients. And one of the nice things about going to medical school in Texas is that it really does have this kind of, and also one of the nice things about being a second year medical student is you're not fully indoctrinated. You don't really know what's possible or not. So like fools rush in, where angels fear to tread. So and the chief of cardiology donated the testing, and the chief of medicine, approved the study, and we got a small grant. And I went to every hotel in Houston, and the last one, which isn't even there anymore, gave us 10 rooms for a month. And I got 10 men and women who had really bad heart disease and who decided not to have bypass surgery, which is hard to find then, because that was when Denton Cooley and Michael DeBakey, and it's like the heyday of bypass surgery. And I put them in a hotel for a month, just me and the cook and these 10 patients. And they got better. 8 of the 10 people after a month. It was the same program that we've been studying now for the last 43 years. It's a whole foods, plant-based diet that's low in fat and sugar and refined carbs, and low especially in the bad fats. It's about 10% to 15% fat. Moderate exercise, like walking an hour a day, meditation and other yoga-based stress management techniques for an hour a day, and support groups. Eat well, move more, stress less, love more. Boom, that's it. And so 8 of the 10 people showed, first of all, the chest pain went away in most people. There was a 91% reduction in the frequency of angina or chest pain. And most people became pain-free. And these are people with really bad disease. I mean, you had to have really bad disease back then to not be considered an operative candidate, because they were operating on pretty much everybody. And
this was just 4 weeks. They were already
a month. That's right. And that was the other reason why people thought it was impossible. They said, "Oh, it's a stupid idea, but go ahead, you'll learn something," And which is like, that's what makes growing up in Texas so great, is they have this real pioneering ethos. Like, yeah, it's a crazy idea, but go for it. You'll learn something.
Love it.
And we know that heart disease, begins in your teens. That soldiers killed in wartime have at 18, 19, or 20 have significant plaque already building up in the arteries in their heart. So the idea that it was reversible was crazy, but even more so that it could only be done in a month. And part of what I've learned along the way, and we can talk more about this, is how dynamic these biological mechanisms are that control our health, for better and for worse. You can get better quickly, you can get worse quickly. And they donated one of the tests, which was a new test at the time, which is now a standard cardiology test, called a thallium scan. And thallium's a radioisotope, and they have you run on a treadmill, and then they inject the thallium, and then they can see, it goes where the blood goes, and they can scan your heart and see if there are any parts of the heart not getting enough blood. And so 8 of the 10, they all weren't getting enough blood to start. And after just a month, 8 of the 10 showed improvement in blood flow. It was also my first experience that when you're doing something that's truly disruptive, how it's met with a lot of resistance. In some ways it's good that medicine's conservative, because you don't want every, fad to be embraced. But people said, oh, how do you know they wouldn't have gotten better anyway? Because you didn't have a randomized control group. I said, well, technically that's true, but have you ever had any patient get better like this? No, but that's besides the point. So
everybody else is the control group. Really?
So I went back to school, finished my MD, then took another year off to do, this time we did a randomized trial, replicated those results, published it in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and went to Boston to do my fellowship at Harvard and my medical residency at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Then moved to San Francisco, and after finishing that, and began the most definitive study called the Lifestyle Heart Trial. And this was the most definitive study because we used, ironically, the state-of-the-art measures of heart disease, high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful this very simple and low-tech and low-cost intervention was. So we used quantitative arteriography to measure how much blockage there was in the arteries, and we actually flew patients to Houston, where they had the best cardiac PET scanner, positron emission tomography scanner, to measure blood flow. And we found that overall, there was some reversal of the amount of blockages in the arteries. They got less clogged after 1 year, whereas they got more clogged after 1 year in the randomized control group. And the control group, by the way, was doing exactly what their doctors were recommended. They were following what was then called a step 2 American Heart Association diet, less red meat, more fish and chicken, take the skin off the chicken, 4 eggs a week kind of thing. And exercising, but they got worse. They got worse more slowly. But again, that at the time it was thought that was the best you could do, was to get worse more slowly, not to stop or reverse it. And so we showed for the first time that there, after a year, there was some reversal. There was less clogging, whereas they got more clogged in the control group. And then we got a grant from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute of the National Institutes of Health to extend the study for 4 more years, for a total of 5 years, and found even more reversal. In other words, the arteries even less clogged after 5 years than after 1 year. In the group that made these lifestyle changes, they got even more clogged after 1 year and even more clogged after 5 years in the randomized control group. And the blood flow improved and by the way, 99% of the patients stopped to reverse the progression of their heart disease. And
Wow.
There was a dose-response relationship. I predicted incorrectly, as it turned out, that the younger people who had less severe disease would do better, but I was wrong. It turned out it wasn't how old or how sick they were. The more they changed, the more they improved at any age. Which is a very hopeful message to give people. The oldest patient was 86 when he started. He died a couple of years ago at the age of almost, actually it was 100 years old when he died. The blood flow as measured by PET scans improved by 400% compared to the control group. And blood flow is really, in many ways, the bottom line in heart disease. And there were 2.5 times fewer what we call cardiac events, heart attacks, strokes, bypasses, angioplasties, and stents in the group that made these lifestyle changes. And the lifestyle changes, the amount of improvement was in direct proportion to the degree of lifestyle change. Again, it wasn't how old or how sick they were. The more they changed, the more they improved at any age. And we published that in the Journal of the American Medical Association as well, in 2 different papers, one on the blockages and one on the blood flow. So I thought, in my naivete, that would really change medical practice. And to some degree it did, but not that much. Because we're trained to use drugs and surgery as doctors. We are reimbursed to use drugs and surgery, so we use drugs and surgery. It's the old Abraham Maslow: if the only tool you have is a hammer, you see everything as a nail. The Abraham Maslow quote. And in fact, I'm on the nutrition working group at the American College of Cardiology, and about 1.5 years ago, we did a survey of how much nutrition are doctors now given in their regular course of training on average in medical schools. And it turns out it's about 4 hours a year. And even most of that is on vitamin C and scurvy and stuff like that. And if you say how much nutrition training is the average cardiologist given in 4 years of cardiology fellowship training, it's none, it's 0. So, it was like, well, that's kind of nice, but, it was more of a footnote. So I thought, okay, we have to change reimbursement if we really want to make this impact people's lives. So I was working and still am with former President Bill Clinton, who in 1993, Hillary asked me to train the chefs that cook for them at the White House. And so we trained the White House and the Air Force One and Camp David and Navy mess chefs. And then 14 years ago after President, he's talked about this publicly, which is the only reason I'm sharing it now, is that 14 years ago when his bypasses clogged up, one of his cardiologists held a press conference on CNN and said, oh, it was all in his genes, his diet and lifestyle had nothing to do with it. And having worked with him for all these years, I knew it had everything to do with it. So I sent him a note and said, look, the people I value the most are the ones who tell me what I need to hear, not just what I want to hear. Pardon me. And you need to know that it's not all in your genes. And if it, that if it were, you'd be a victim and you'd be helpless, and you're not a helpless victim. You're one of those powerful guys on the planet. And so I thought either I'll never hear from him again or maybe I will. So we met a few days later, and he's been now doing this for the last 14 years. He's again talked publicly about it. He looks great. His disease is getting better. And again, whatever your politics, when a former president, especially one who was known for eating a pretty unhealthy diet, was able to make these changes, I think that sets a great example for everyone. So I thought, so we were meeting at the White House one day, and I'd met with the heads of Medicare earlier that day. And I said, he said, "How was your day?" I said, "It was really challenging." He said, "What happened?" I said, "Well, they just aren't interested in funding research on lifestyle. They said, well, no one will do it." And so I brought with me we trained, the first hospital we trained happened to be in Omaha at Allegiant Emmanuel Medical Center. And I brought with me the chief of cardiology there at the time, Rick Collins. And he said, "Look, I make my living doing angioplasty and putting in stents, and 90% of the people who I would have operated on were able to follow the program well enough that they didn't need it," and sat down. And by the way, angioplasties and stents have now been shown in 8 randomized trials in stable patients not to be very effective at all. They don't prolong life, they don't prevent heart attacks, and they don't even reduce angina. They can be life-saving if you're in the middle of having a heart attack, but most of them were done in stable people. Anyway, and they said, "Well, if we pay for your program, everybody's got a crystal ball and a pyramid's going to want to have Medicare coverage." And I brought with me Ken McDonough when he was who's a physician who was the chief medical officer at Mutual of Omaha, which was the first insurance company that covered our program. And he said, "Look, my name's Ken McDonough. I'm the chief medical officer at Mutual of Omaha. We're Mutual of Omaha. We're not a radical insurance company. And we pay for Dean's program because it's got years of randomized controlled trial data showing it's safe and effective." So they weren't going to do anything. So I met with the president. We were having dinner, and he said, "Well, maybe I can help." I said, "Well, maybe you can. You're the president of the United States. You're the head of the executive branch. And I thought, well, he'll make a phone call, and that'll be it. And then I was also working with Newt Gingrich when he was Speaker of the House with one of his family members. And it was one of the few things that they actually came together on. Even back then, it was polarized, even more so now. So I thought, well, the President of the United States, Speaker of the House, 20 members of the Senate, across the political spectrum, and even more in the House, from the most conservative Republicans and the most liberal Democrats, heads of the AARP and other organizations. I thought, well, wow, this shouldn't be that hard. And it actually took 16 years. And it's not like in year 15, that it's about to happen. It's like, is this ever going to happen? But long story short is they did create a new benefit category to cover our program in 2010, which is great. Because again, when you change reimbursement, it changes medical practice and even medical education. So I'm deeply grateful to CMS for doing that. And just a few months ago, they extended that coverage to cover my reversing heart disease program when it's done via Zoom, done like we're having this conversation here. So now we can reach people wherever they live. They don't have to live near a hospital or clinic or a doctor's office that we train. So we can reduce health inequities and health disparities, and reach people in food deserts or rural areas or pretty much anywhere. And by the way, if anyone's interested in learning more about our program, which not only Medicare, but many of the other insurance companies are now covering, just go to ornish.com, myname.com, our website, for more information on that. So that's a rather long-winded explanation of how I got interested in this.
Oh, I mean, it's amazing. There's so many things you said there that I would love to chime in on. And, but I love the fact that, and this is such a powerful message, is the message of empowerment, right? Is teaching people, showing them, and this is what I talk about all the time in our community, that you're not a victim, that your choices matter, and that you can make different choices every day if you're willing to change your daily routine. The choices you make can create health or disease. Like, it's up to you, and you have so much agency in your own life and your future.
And not only health and disease, which it certainly can, but also just how you feel. And ultimately, fear is not a sustainable motivator. For a month or two after someone's had colon cancer surgery or a heart attack or whatever, they'll do pretty much anything their doctor says. But it doesn't last because, we all know we're going to die. The mortality rate is still 100%. It's 1 per person. But we don't think about it most of the time. It's too scary. And so I've just found that efforts to motivate people to change out of fear are not really sustainable. What's sustainable is joy and pleasure and love and feeling good. And because these biological mechanisms are so dynamic, ironically, when you make big changes, it's sometimes easier than making small ones, because when you make big changes, you get big benefits and you feel so much better so quickly in ways that matter. It reframes the whole reason for making changes from fear of dying or fear of a heart attack or stroke or cancer coming back or whatever, to joy and love and feeling good. You know, the Game Changers movie, I'm sure you've seen, that
Yes.
Joey Tahoyos did with James Cameron and others, is so brilliant because it's kind of like a Tesla car. You know, back then it was like, do I choose between a wimpy car that's not going to pollute, or a really, a macho car that's going to pollute the environment? And, what Elon Musk did that was so brilliant is to show that a completely non-polluting car can be more powerful than a Ferrari, And I think that's the Game Changers film in a way, because they showed that when you go on a plant-based diet, your athletic performance improves, your sexual performance improves, you think more clearly, you have more energy, you feel better, and how quickly that can occur. I mean, as an example, in a negative way, after the very first study I did, when the patients got better after a month, they said, great, let's go celebrate, let's go have a steak. And a couple of them ended up in the coronary care unit because you can get worse quickly as well. And so the new book that my wife Ann and I wrote, the UnDo book, puts forth this unifying theory, because we found over time that these same lifestyle changes not only could often reverse the progression of heart disease, but also type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. We did a randomized trial with the then chairs of urology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York, Bill Fair and Peter Carroll, when he was the chair of urology at UCSF, where I'm a professor. We found that the progression of early stage prostate cancer could often be slowed, stopped, and sometimes even reversed by making these lifestyle changes. And what's true for prostate cancer will likely be true for breast cancer. So we wondered, why is that? What are some of the mechanisms that might affect that? So we did a study, which we published with Craig Venter, who was one of the first to decode the human genome. And we found that in just 3 months, we actually did biopsies of the normal tissue of men in these studies with early prostate cancer. And we found that over 500 genes were changed, 501 to be exact. And in every case, in simple terms, turning on the good genes and turning off the bad genes, and particularly downregulating what are called the RAS oncogenes. And as you know, oncogenes are genes that tend to promote cancer, and particularly the genes that promote prostate, breast, and colon cancer were switched off in just 3 months, which I thought was amazing. And then we did a study with Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel Prize for her pioneering work with telomeres, ends of our chromosomes that regulate cellular aging. And they're like the plastic tips on the ends of a shoelace that keep your shoelace from unraveling. They keep your DNA from unraveling. And over time, when the DNA replicates, the telomeres over time get shorter. And as our telomeres get shorter, our lives get shorter, and the risk of premature death from the most common forms of heart disease, cancer, and all these chronic conditions go up proportionate to that, including Alzheimer's disease, which we can talk about if you want. And it had already been shown in her earlier work with Alyssa Epel that chronic stress makes your telomeres get shorter faster. Women who were taking care of kids with autism, compared to those who weren't, had a 9 to 17 year shortening of their lifespan based on their telomere shortening. People eating junk food or smoked or were sedentary, their telomeres got shorter faster. So we met one day and I said, if bad things make your telomeres shorter, maybe good things make them longer. So we did a study and we found about 14 years ago for the first time that we could actually lengthen anything. In this case, the same lifestyle changes could lengthen telomeres. And when we published this in the Lancet, the Lancet editors called it, it was a Lancet Oncology, but the Lancet editors sent a press release and they said, first study showing that lifestyle changes may reverse aging at a cellular level. And so I wondered, why is it? It wasn't like there was one set of diet and lifestyle changes for heart disease, a different one for prostate cancer, a different one for diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It was the same for all these. Why is that? And I realized, especially with this talk of all this interest in personalized medicine, why is it these same lifestyle changes can affect so many different chronic diseases? And I realized it's because they're not so different from each other. I was trained, like most doctors, to view heart disease and diabetes and prostate cancer and so on as being fundamentally, different diseases, different diagnoses, different treatments. But I realized they all share the same underlying biological mechanisms, things like chronic inflammation, overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system during times of stress, changes in immune function, changes in the microbiome, the 100 trillion cells that live in our gut, and in oxidative stress and angiogenesis and so on. And each of these biological mechanisms in turn is directly influenced by what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and how much love and support we have. Again, to reduce it to its essence, eat well, move more, stress less, love more. And
repeat that slowly, because those are 4 very important things.
Eat well, again, whole foods, plant-based diet, low in fat and sugar. Eat well, stress less, stretching, breathing, meditation, other yoga-based techniques. move more, find a kind of exercise you like, because if you like it, you'll do it, and love more. Spend more time with your friends and family or loved ones. Or in our studies, we have support groups. And we're now in the midst of doing the first randomized trial to see whether these same lifestyle changes may stop or perhaps even reverse the progression of early stage Alzheimer's disease. And I think we're at a place with Alzheimer's very reminiscent of where we were with heart disease 40 some odd years ago when I first started doing studies there. In other words, back then, as now, it was thought the best you could do with lifestyle was to slow down the rate at which you get worse. With heart disease and other diseases, we found, kind of like ounce of prevention, pound of cure. It takes a lot to reverse a chronic disease. That's why we were the first to show that in a randomized trial, because people didn't go far enough. If you're just trying to prevent disease, moderate changes may be enough. But if you're actually trying to undo or reverse something, it takes really big changes. And so I think we're at a place with Alzheimer's where back then they found that more moderate changes could slow the rate at which your arteries got clogged. We found more intensive changes could actually stop or reverse it. And likewise now, the more moderate changes, the finger study, the mind study, others like that, have found that they will slow the rate of progression into dementia. My hypothesis is that more intensive ones might stop or reverse it. And it's even more important with Alzheimer's because there are, at least with heart disease, there are some effective drugs and surgical interventions that have some benefit, but nothing really works for Alzheimer's other than to slow it down a bit. In fact, the only drug that's been approved in 20 years, despite the billions and billions of dollars they spent studying trying to find the magic bullet drug, was a drug that came out last year called aducanumab. And one study showed it did nothing. The other showed it slowed down the rate at which it got worse a little. 3 of the FDA commissioners resigned in protest when they got approved. It's $56,000 a dose and so on. And a third of the people get brain hemorrhages or brain swelling, have to stop taking it. But it just shows you how desperate people are for a sense of hope. So we're in the midst of, I think we're at a place with Alzheimer's, very reminiscent. And I thought, okay, let's do a randomized trial with 100 men and women who have early Alzheimer's disease and see whether or not we can stop or reverse its progression. And we had to change the intervention to do it via Zoom 2 years ago when COVID-19 hit. And if anything good came out of COVID, it was learning that we could do this as well via Zoom as doing it in person. So we're now collaborating with the heads of neurology at Harvard and Mass General and University of California, San Diego and Renown, and hopefully others, where they're recruiting and testing patients there, but doing the intervention from here. And I'm cautiously optimistic that we may be able to show that. Stay tuned. If anyone's listening to this, we're still recruiting the last group of patients. Again, go to ornish.com. It's all free. We provide you 21 meals a week for you and your spouse or caregiver, along with other things. And, what's good for your heart is good for your brain. As you mentioned, a panel of experts from US News has rated what they call the Ornish diet as #1 for heart health for 11 years since 2011 when they began rating these changes. And stay tuned. I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's really important work. I'm excited to see how it develops, and I'm optimistic as well. My
And
dad.
by the way, let me just say one thing before I forget. Whatever we show, it'll be important. If we show it does nothing, that'll be important too. So we just want to do it. And let me say one last thing, I'm sorry, before I forget, which is, as you said, the reason why I do these studies and why I've spent so much of my adult life doing them, and they're really hard to do. They're hard to get funding for because people think like, why should we fund a study that everybody knows is impossible, and without the funding you can't show it works, and I don't think it works, I don't want to fund it. It's a catch-22, and it's hard to get them published and so on. But the reason I do them is that properly done and published in the leading peer-reviewed journals with the top investigators, we can often redefine what's possible for people. I mean, like right now, for example, if you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you're told it's only going to get worse. It's just a question of how quickly, and get your affairs in order, and if there's anything you want to do, do it now, and all that. And it's such a horrible diagnosis. And as I know from having been depressed years ago, that the brain just shuts down, when you're faced with no hope, when you take away someone's hope. And so and it's still a big if, but if we could show, as we have shown with other diseases, that we might be able to stop or reverse its progression, then that it can be an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral.
That's really good. What I was going to just inject was that my dad died of Parkinson's a couple of years ago. And so, that's definitely on my mind. And he was, he was in, I don't want to dishonor him, but he was in denial that he had a problem. And so it's hard to help someone if they don't admit they need help. Right. But anyhow, So it'd be
By the way,
really
I think there's a lot of overlap between Parkinson's and Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's. Yeah.
What may affect one may affect the other as well.
Yeah. It's just that whole neurodegenerative brain disease thing, right?
Exactly.
Well, I'd love to touch on, because I want to be respectful of your time, if you don't mind, quickly.
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank you for the prostate cancer study, because I talk about this all the time. I even mentioned it in my first book. I mean, it was such an important study because if correct me if I'm wrong, but this was the first of, or if not one of the first studies to show a slowing down and reversal of progression of prostate cancer early stage or any type of cancer with diet and lifestyle intervention, correct?
It's the
Like
first
before that, there really wasn't a study that showed what yours did.
That's true. And again, many people who know more about this than I do think that what's true for prostate cancer is likely to be true for breast cancer as well. And I've been talking with Dr. Laura Esserman, who runs the breast cancer center at UCSF, about one day we want to do a study with women who have really early breast cancer to see if that may be true as well.
I hope that happens. That'd be amazing. One last thing. So this caught my attention when COVID first hit, and I was reading the reports coming out of Spain and Italy, and looking at, okay, who is most vulnerable, who's at risk, the people that are getting severe disease and dying, what do they have in common? And it was pretty clear right away that these people were elderly, but that many of them also had multiple comorbidities. They had heart disease, they were obese, they had diabetes, some had cancer, things like that. And knowing that, I was encouraging my audience to say, look, we don't know, what the cure is yet. We don't know that much about this virus, blah, blah, blah. But we do know there are things you can do to put yourself in the best position for survival. And that is with your diet and lifestyle. And of course, I'm a big advocate of a whole food, plant-based diet and exercise and stress reduction and love and support, all the four sort of principles that you repeat often. And I read this in some of the accompanying literature about your book, that the UnDo It program has been proven to decrease the severity of COVID-19. Will you talk about that?
Yeah, well, we've known for some time that people who have chronic diseases are more likely to die, get sick and die from COVID. That's been clear. But two studies came out last fall that I thought in October that I thought were really amazing. One looked at frontline healthcare workers in 6 different countries, including the US. There were about almost 3,000 of them who get exposed to COVID, all day, every day. And they found that those that ate a plant-based diet were 73% less likely to get moderate to severe COVID. Those on a pescatarian diet who ate some fish, but otherwise a plant-based diet, were 59% less likely. But those who were following an Atkins paleo, high animal protein, high fat diet were 400% more likely to get moderate to severe COVID. Now, I think that's especially important because even if you're triple vaccinated, there's still a 10 to 20% breakthrough infection rate. And so people are a lot saying, well, what else can I do besides getting vaccinated to reduce my risk of getting moderate to severe COVID? And this is one thing you can do. And the other study came out of Harvard School of Public Health, Walter Willett, and King's College in London. They looked at over 600,000 people. And again, they found that those that ate a predominantly plant-based diet were 43% less likely to get moderate to severe COVID. So again, it's just another example of this unifying theory that we talked about, that when you make these lifestyle changes, it has an across-the-board improvement, and in this case, in enhancing your immune function. We didn't actually do it with our diet and lifestyle program per se, but again, it's the same kind of diet, a whole foods plant-based diet that we have been studying and recommending for so many years.
Well, it's amazing. Those studies are so exciting. They're so exciting for me to see because, again, it's just validating this really simple truth that your diet and lifestyle and your stress and your emotional, social health really are the biggest levers that you can pull to make an impact on your well-being and your health and the strength of your immune system. And that is so encouraging. And it's the message that the world needs to hear. And I'm just so thankful for you, Dr. Ornish, and for all the incredible monumental work you've done over 4 decades. And Man, keep up the good work. It has been a thrill to talk with you.
No, well, I'm so grateful for your giving me this opportunity to share this information, and hope at least for some people it's been helpful. But the biggest obstacle I find, which I'm sure you do as well, is that people think, oh, diet and lifestyle, that's kind of boring. How powerful could that be? It has to be a new drug, a new laser, something, new surgical procedure, something really high tech and expensive to be powerful. And I think, again, drugs and surgery used properly can be life-saving. But I think our unique contribution has been that even when you need those, you also need to treat the underlying cause. And I think our unique contribution has been to use these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to show just how powerful these simple lifestyle changes can be. So in closing, if anybody has Alzheimer's, early Alzheimer's, and is interested in our study, it's all done provided for free. Go to ornish.com. If you have heart disease and you have Medicare, go to ornish.com and information on that. And if you're just interested in learning more about our work, it's all in our new book, our book which just came out in paperback called UnDo It. So to me, awareness is always the first step in healing. And so I'm grateful to you for giving me this opportunity to help raise awareness. So thank you, Chris. I really
Thanks again. Yeah, awareness is really, to distill it down, it's giving a person the belief that healing is possible, right?
Exactly.
And once you have that belief, then it really opens up an entire world of possibilities for you to explore and things you can do to change your life. So anyway, thanks again, Dr. Ornish. Thanks everybody for watching. Please like and share this video, subscribe to my channel, and you can follow Dr. Ornish and get resources from him at ornish.com. He's got a number 7 best-selling books you can find on Amazon and in bookstores, but the brand new one is called UnDo It, and I hope you'll get that book.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
Chris.
Thanks for watching.
Bye. Take care.